Hello and welcome back to ALECtv, here from our annual meeting in Salt Lake City. I'm your host, Matt Fisher, and joining me now is a special guest, Vinnie Vernuccio of the Mackinac Center. Thank you for joining us today, Vinnie.
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you on. So I want to talk about labor laws with you today. The PRO Act, the issue of Janus Rights. Let's start with the PRO Act. Well, you're here today to discuss both. Walk our listeners through what both of those items are, who may not have heard about those.
Absolutely. So with the PRO Act, this has direct implication on states' rights.
Right.
So the first thing, the PRO Act is essentially the smorgasbord of bad ideas from the left.
Okay, right off the bat, it's a smorgasbord.
It's
a whole lot of bad's coming.
It's a whole lot of bads coming, and there's many different facets to it. First is it would repeal right to work, the state's ability to enact right to work laws, where 27 states now have given private sector workers the freedom to choose whether or not to pay a union. Right to work simply means that a union can't get a worker fired for not paying them.
Gotcha.
Right off the bat, PRO Act would say, nope, you can't do that anymore. Literally, unions could say, hey, this worker's not paying us, you got to fire them.
Wow.
If right to work is repealed in those 27 states. It affects independent contractors. And I'm not just talking about Uber drivers, not just the gig economy, but essentially California has been a catastrophe. They passed a bill out there called AB 5. It was so bad, even the bill sponsor said it was too bad, and she amended it, giving all these exemptions. But essentially, it would make entrepreneurs, independent workers, people working for themselves, it would make them employees. And, or it would simply have them lose their livelihoods.
Wow.
So this thing was so bad in California, they put a ton of exemptions to it. None of those exist in the PRO Act. Other things it would do, and I won't go through all of them because I told you, there's a lot of bad in that there bill.
Gotcha.
But another thing it would do is it would essentially destroy the franchising industry. It would make business owners into managers. So it would take somebody that owns their own business, has a franchise. Essentially, it would turn them into somebody, as an owner making $200-something thousand a year.
Yeah.
Turn them into a manager making about $50,000 a year. Wow. Because it would say that employees are basically the employees of both the franchise and the parent franchisor company. And franchisors won't want that liability, so they'll say, well, you're all basically company stores at this point. Gotcha. So, it would be devastating for entrepreneurs. And we've heard horror stories from across the country of what would happen if the PRO Act passes, and all the really bad things in there. In fact, things like, you don't even think of a thing called secondary boycotts. What's a secondary boycott?
Don't ask me, I have no clue.
Secondary boycott is, I have no problem with you, with your store, but I'm trying to organize one of your suppliers or somebody you sell to.
Wow.
So I'm going to start a boycott on your store and your business, even though I have nothing to do with you.
Wow.
Right now, that's illegal. PRO Act wants to lift that.
So the PRO Act doesn't have a lot of pros in the end. It's a lot of cons, that's what you're saying.
Well, it would make forced unionization a lot easier. So if you want to take away employee choice, if you want to make it easier for employees or for unions to organize employees with or without their consent or for or against their will, then it's a pro. If you believe in entrepreneurship, if you believe in worker freedom, if you want to give workers a choice, if you want to give small mom and pop shop businesses the ability to continue running their own business, then yeah, I don't think there's a lot of pros there.
So obviously the PRO Act is probably not a good idea. So let's talk about Janus Rights and how it pertains to right to work. So obviously the PRO Act is the antithesis of right to work. How did Janus Rights come into the equation there? And explain to our audience what that means.
Sure. So let's shift. The PRO Act, we're talking about mostly private sectors, and that's federal law. Congress is looking at that right now. Janus deals with public sector workers.
Gotcha.
So you're talking about your bureaucrats, your teachers, people like that. It comes from a Supreme Court decision, Janus versus Afscme, where the Supreme Court essentially gave right to work, like we were just talking about, to public employees across the country. It said that because everything that government unions do is political, public employees have a First Amendment right to choose to pay. Join the union, fine, that's great. Or say, no, I don't support what you're doing, and I don't want to pay you. So it brought right to work to public employees in right to work states, but also in those non-right to work states where unions can actually get them fired for not paying them.
Interesting.
So that's the heart of the Janus decision. But the justices actually went further and said, and I know this is shocking, so I just want to brace you here.
Okay, bracing.
But they said that in order to take money out of somebody's paycheck and pay dues, you have to have evidence that they want to pay. You have to have what Justice Alito called evidence of affirmative consent. So what we're seeing now is that a lot of states, right after Janus, I mean, even California, New York, they said, okay, you don't have to pay if you don't want to. The catch was that they gave these really arbitrary timelines of when public employees could exercise those rights. So essentially, you want to stop paying dues? Okay, fine, you can opt out, but you can only do it after the first full moon, after the vernal equinox, or
Right.
very limited time frame. Sometimes as little as 2 weeks to a month.
Right.
So what state legislatures are looking at right now, there's ALEC model policy on that. Indiana actually just passed this law. It says that first you have to inform public employees, hey, you have a right to pay, but you also have a right not to pay. And if you do want to pay, then you have to tell your employer you want to pay and give them a signature. Don't allow the union to be the intermediary. You want something taken out of your paycheck, sign something, give it directly to your employer.
Nice.
I mean, shocking.
Yeah.
Shocking. It's not just Janus, but it's just good bookkeeping.
Right.
And then because they are waiving a constitutional right, those waivers can expire. So think Miranda rights. You waive your Miranda rights, it doesn't stay waived forever. So it gives public employees a periodic opportunity, essentially an open enrollment period. You say, okay, I want to keep paying dues. I'm going to sign something again and say, yes, please keep taking dues out of my paycheck. Or it gives them that fresh opportunity to make that choice. And on top of that, it gets rid of those arbitrary window periods so they can say, okay, union's no longer doing a good job. I want to opt out now as opposed to waiting for whenever that time period is, if I'm lucky enough to know when it is.
Right. So for those who want to learn more about the differences between the PRO Act, the issues about unions, Janus Rights, where can they go to? How can they find out more?
Absolutely. You can go to Mackinac.org. And it's Michigan. We spell things a little weird, so it's MACKINAC.org. And there's a suite of resources both on Janus and also on the PRO Act and also on workersforopportunity.org. That's the Mackinac Center's national initiative, which is working on a lot of these issues all across the country, teaming up with state legislators, teaming up with local SPN affiliate think tanks and others that want to do this in their states as well.
Awesome. Well, Vinnie, it's been a pleasure to have you on.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Be sure to stay tuned for more this week from our annual meeting here on ALECtv.